Hello, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us once again, a guy who has a company that handles $100 million in distressed property annually. It is Fabian Calvo. Fabian Calvo, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg Hunter, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Of course, you run the notehouse.us, and we're going to talk more than just about real estate because a guy like you has to know about interest rates, war, that's possibility of war. You have to understand about the economy, jobs, whether people have the incomes to buy houses. There's a lot out there to deal with, and I know you're sitting across the table from people who are buying 100, 200, 300 houses at a crack. And what are you hearing in the real estate market? Is this party going to keep going?
Yeah, I am actually hearing that, we've been doing these interviews now for maybe a year. Even before that, I put out a little micro documentary on my Fabian for Liberty YouTube channel about the housing market, talking about the pump and dump manipulation underway. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Pretty much every hedge fund manager that I talk to, and I'm talking multi-billion-dollar hedge funds that are telling me, in my forecasting as well, that the housing market will continue, and just year over year, you saw home prices up 12%. The reason that's happening, of course, is because you basically have, this is, I think, the first time ever we have a prop on the Greg Hunter show, and this is a syringe, and if you see this, they're pumping up the housing market all the way to the top until, boom, the thing blows up. That's exactly what's happening. That's what these people are depending on, Greg, okay? They know that they're going to keep buying these assets or, these toxic homes, toxic loans, pennies on the dollar, as they have been for the last couple of years. They also know government is right now in the mode of beginning to give out no money down loans like crazy. In addition to that, you're going to start to see new government programs, and you heard it here first, for loans under $100,000. In some cases under $50,000. In a lot of metro markets around the world, across the country, you have homes that, they're worth 40, 50 grand. People can't qualify for those loans. They're going to give those out like candy. You'll know the cataclysmic economic collapse is on the horizon, in my estimation, a couple of years, unless there's some black swan World War III event that breaks out, when the government's handing out loans like crazy, and we're already getting there. I mean, look at FHA just last week. If you've had a bankruptcy in the last 13 months, you qualify for a loan. It used to be 24 months or beyond. Now you can get a loan if you had a bankruptcy just a year ago. So the trend's definitely happening in the direction that I've been talking about now for well over a year.
What has happened with this recent interest rate spike in May? The 10-year Treasury was at a 1.63% or so, and now it's at 2.8%, gone up, more than 100 basis points. 30-year money is 4.45%, something like that, 4.5%, gone up, a whole percentage point. Are you seeing a slowdown on the fringes of regular buyers because of this rise in 30-year mortgage rates?
Yeah, regular qualified buyers, but keep in mind, what's driving the market now in many markets, 75%, 60% of all home sales are cash investors. They don't care about rates. I've talked about this before. They're not really rate sensitive because the truth is that the end buyer that they're going to be selling to likely is going to have no equity into the home when they buy the house. So what does it even matter to them, right? And not only that, you're likely going to begin to see teaser rates come back where they're, 3% interest for a period of time until they adjust. The thing is that when I sit across from multi-billion-dollar hedge fund managers at these conferences that I attend, and they're telling me that, look, they're all in. They think that exactly what I'm going to say, that the government is going to start giving out loans to these people. That's the end. That's their exit strategy. Okay. So when I see all the money, Deutsche Bank making $2 billion loans to some of these hedge funds, and it goes on and on and on. I don't think these guys are going to get stuck with these properties in a collapse scenario unless there's some kind of black swan event. Now, I could also say the same guys that are doing this, you have a few of them that are leaving the country because they all believe, like, look, once we do reach the end of the road here, this thing's going to blow up, and it's going to get pretty nasty here.
When you say pretty nasty here, I mean, is this the last real estate inflation bubble? Is this the last bubble that we're going to get?
I mean, look, I think personally markets will always continue to fluctuate up and down. But I mean, will we enter another Great Depression that's much worse than the original Great Depression? Yeah, because we have an entitlement society. We have people that think that they are, that they're entitled to having free stuff. That's the way people in power now have painted it. You deserve to have free stuff. We're going to give you free education, free homes, free whatever you want. So when this time this leg goes down, it's going to be much worse because you're going to have tens of millions of people out there in the streets demanding for government to do something, demanding for, to take more from the producers or whatever it may be. That's one of the biggest driving factors why you have, a surge in people expatriating, or you have people that are just leaving, or at least at the high level that I deal with, these high net worth individuals, because they don't want the government to basically confiscate everything they own.
Wow. Could the hedge fund guys get hurt with this if we have some kind of a war in Syria? Let's talk about war in Syria. Let's say they light off, 50, cruise missiles at the Assad regime for this alleged chemical weapons attack. They've done this before. They said it was the Assad regime, and questions came up about the rebels doing it. Again, the Assad regime was winning, and why would the Assad regime all of a sudden pull out weapons of mass destruction? If they're winning, they wouldn't need to do that. But our government says they did use weapons of mass destruction. It looks like the French now, they were out, they're in. I guess they're in now. The Brits are out. At least that's what they say in Parliament in their vote. What happens if we have war? Don't these big money guys take a pounding?
Well, I mean, if you have war, you'd see an interest rates would go down, because I think you still see, we still see, and we spoke about this yesterday, you still see a lot of international money coming back to the U.S. They think it's a safe bet. For some of them, they might be proven right. We'll see. But if there's a major war, you'll see a lot of emerging markets, a lot of other investors that are in emerging markets, and those emerging markets are getting pounded right now with inflation. You'll see that money come back to the U.S. Interest rates will drop, I believe, dramatically. But look, it depends how big this is. If this is another Libya, peace action by Obama, then they might get away with it. But this time's a little bit different. You have the Russians sending in warships. Ultimately, what I believe, what I'm hearing from my contacts and everybody else, is that they don't believe the Chinese are going to go to war over Syria. They don't believe the Russians will go to war over Syria. I think these guys have a much longer term plan, which is basically to watch the West bankrupt themselves. They're already bankrupt, and they're spending millions and millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, on these military escapades. So their longer term plan is, look, let's put political pressure on them to try to stop this, whether it's Putin saying we'll cut off natural gas imports to Europe, or whether it's the Chinese saying we'll dump U.S. treasuries. Ultimately, I don't think they go to war over this, but this is the thing. I've heard some people mention this is as dangerous as the Cuban Missile Crisis. I would agree with that. Anything is possible. They're claiming an attack could come this Saturday after UN inspectors are out there. It's definitely, war is never good for the economy, and that's a total myth that it is. So we'll definitely watch it closely and see what happens.
So are these guys also, they can't all be just, trying to, pump this up and then dump everything. Is there an inflation play? Do these guys think that, either way, if we pump it and dump it, we'll make money, or if we hold it, we'll rent it, and the value of the house will go up? Is there an inflation component here with these guys?
Yeah, well, of course. Look, they're looking at bilateral trade agreements sweeping Asia. Now, 8 of the largest economies in Asia are engaged in bilateral trade agreements. They've ditched the dollar. The Russians and the Chinese have ditched the dollar. The Chinese and Japanese have ditched the dollar. The BRIC nations are getting ready to ditch the dollar. So that means Bernanke needs to print more money to pay for more of this, reckless debt. Look at during this whole Syria event, we've had a near U.S. default. It could be potentially imminent. We've surpassed the last increase in the debt limit to $16.699 trillion. Obama has increased spending by 88% in just 6 years that he's been in office. So what they think is that the Fed, and what I think is that the Fed's just going to keep on printing, which is going to have asset prices continue to rise, like you've seen in the stock market, like you've seen in the housing market. But, Greg, that could only go on for so long. And, eventually that only works for so long. And eventually it leads to a much larger economic collapse, which is what, I believe, and what a lot of really prominent people that I work with on a daily basis believe as well.
They think we'll have a much bigger collapse this time. I mean, is it game over this time?
Again, it's not necessarily game over, but many of these guys are talking about how, and I think that you're going to see America lose superpower status. People like George Soros are on record saying China should be the economic engine of the world. And a lot of people believe that. I mean, they want to see the U.S. and the West fall, and not be as powerful. So, economic collapse, it's very difficult, may take years to overcome. That's why I tell people, listen, get out of the job paradigm, start trying to learn some skills, maybe become an entrepreneur, think about maybe relocating or something. But people need to start taking some steps right now to mitigate what's on the horizon.
What are your people, if you're talking to these big people, billionaires across the table, billionaire hedge fund managers, are they investing in gold and silver, or is that to them?
Yeah, for most of them, some of them are investing in gold and silver. Some of them do think it's a total barbaric relic. Others, so some of them you have guys that own thousands and thousands of houses, have them rented, have a massive amount of cash flow coming in. They plan on flipping these homes when no money down loans come back in style. They laugh at gold. They think it's, and who knows, these guys are real big real estate guys. Others do really buy a lot of gold and silver. They believe in it. So it's really, I'd say it's probably 50-50. I, of course, am a huge believer in gold and silver. I buy it monthly. It's the absolute best hedge. Again, let me just stress, merging markets across the country right now, inflation is kicking people into where. Inflation is running rampant. It is a perfect example of fiat currencies failing. So you have to be in something of real value. Look at the other day, you had people striking across the country working at Wendy's because they can't even live on $7.25 an hour. They can barely buy gasoline for that out here in California, where gas is $4, $4.25. So yeah, inflation is really hitting the middle class and the poor the hardest. And those are the people that will suffer the most in this inflationary spiral upwards.
And, of course, war in the Middle East, then all bets are off.
All bets are off. I think I've said it on this program several times. Black swan events, war is obviously one of them. Months ago, you had potential war breaking out with North Korea. Now you have clearly a destabilization campaign sweeping the Middle East and North Africa. This is something that's been planned and orchestrated. Anybody with half a brain can see that, look, we allowed 500,000 people to get slaughtered, killed with machetes in Rwanda and did nothing. 1,000 people die with chemical weapons, and all of a sudden we're moving 5 warships and destroyers into the Mediterranean. It makes absolutely no sense unless there is some kind of agenda behind it, which of course there is an agenda behind it. I will say this as well. A lot of this centers around the faltering dollar and the role of the dollar as the petrodollar. You have the Saudis, the U.S., all of these guys want to prop up the dollar with this petrodollar system. That's why they must control most of the oil reserves, most of the shipping lanes, and and that happens to be in the Middle East and in parts of North Africa. So that's why you see these actions taking place there.
Fabian Calvo, thank you for taking us to school with your rich contacts in the real estate market and giving us your views on the global economic system. Thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Greg.